In this tutorial, we will have a look how we can create the shoot if we play our game. As you can see, whenever I click left mouse button, we shooting as you can see. So we're gonna make this. And before I jump into the coding part, I especially want to thank ShioriPlayz and Rajat Sharma, aka Game of Life, for supporting me on Patreon as well as on YouTube. And if you want to do that, guys, you can do on Patreon as well as on YouTube. You can take membership, and by that you will unlock many benefits. And also I have some Unity 6 and C# course on Udemy page, so you can go and check that out. I will have a link in the description as well for those. So without wasting any more time, let's dive into this shooting tutorial. So let's dive into this shooting tutorial. A separate script for that. So we will move over to our project tab, then assets, and then script folder. Let's right click there, create mono behavior script, and you can name that script to something like player shoot. I already have created that script over here, as you can see, player shoot. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select my player to game object or this player in the hierarchy and drag it over this player shoot script to this add component section in the inspector. So I already added, so I'm gonna remove this. So let's right click on it and let's click on this remove component, and let's open up the player shoot script by double clicking on it. And what we need, I'm going to remove this comment and this start function we don't need. Instead we will move over to this update function, and over here we're going to check some for input. So I want to check with my left mouse button, so let's use this if condition. So let's make this if and make some first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if we click the left mouse button or not. So we need to use this function, it called input dot case get mouse button down, and make this first bracket. And into this first bracket we can pass 0. 0 basically means the left mouse button, and if you pass 1 instead of 0, it means the right mouse button. So I'm gonna check with my left mouse button, so I will pass 0. So if input dot get mouse button down 0 basically means if we clicking the left mouse button, that what we want to do, we want to shoot out. So for that I'm gonna create a separate function. So let's make it over here. For function we're gonna type void, and we have to name the function. So I'm gonna call it something like shoot, and let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And for now I'm gonna print out a message it's perfectly working or not for checking purposes. So I'm gonna type this debug.log in order to print out message, and we need to pass a string in this quotation, the message that we want to see, something like I'm gonna call shoot, and let's close that up with semicolon. And we're gonna call this function when we click the left mouse button. So over here as you can see, if input dot get mouse button down 0 basically means if we clicking the left mouse button, then I'm gonna call this shoot function. So let's call the shoot function here, and then make first bracket and then close that up with semicolon. And what shoot function is doing, it basically printing out this message player shoot. As you can see, shoot a message in the console says shoot only. And now let's press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity, and you will see that our whenever we're gonna click the left mouse button, the message should just gonna pop up, because we calling the shoot function, and shoot function basically printing out the message in the console says shoot. So just wait a little moment and you will see that. So just wait a little moment. So just wait a little moment. It's gonna take few moments to compile our script, and once it's done we are ready to shoot. So now it's done, and if I select my console tab and then click on this play button and try to click the left mouse button, you will see as soon as we're gonna click left mouse button, that shoot function will call out, and that shoot function just printing out the message in the console says shoot. So if I just click left mouse button on my with my mouse, as you can see, as soon as I'm clicking in the console tab, shoot message just getting pop up. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and let's double click on this message. So instead of printing out this message, we're gonna shoot out. But before we shoot, let's create the bullet that we want to shoot out. So let's for that I'm gonna move over to my project tab, then assets folder, then I'm gonna move over to my sprites folder, and I have this sprite sheet. So let's select that, go over to inspector, click on open sprite editor. So we can see we have multiple bullets, so we need to split individually. So sprite mode we will leave it to multiple, and pixel per unit we're gonna do something like 16 in order to make this sprite large in size. And to get rid of blurry we're going to choose filter filter mode to point no filter. And after doing all of these things, click on this apply button. And now we will go to a sprite editor tab. Let's click on slice, and we're going to leave it to automatic, and then click on slice and click on this apply button in the top right in your sprite editor tab. You can see, so now it's splitted individually, and I'm gonna select my game view once again, and let's go to that spreadsheet, and let's click on this arrow in order to see the individual. And we can see by now we have all of this. So I'm gonna choose any of them. So I'm gonna find the perfect one, and we have in the bottom, I guess. So let's choose, so this one seems perfect. So I'm going to select that sprite. Let's drag it over to this scene view, or into this hierarchy. I'm going to drag it over to my scene view, and I'm going to make this a little bit more small. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the whole sprite sheet one more time. Let's go to inspector, and pixel per unit we're going to make it something around 25 in order to make this one small. And let's click on this apply button, and now it's small and it seems pretty much fine. And let's select that, and I'm gonna drag it over to top in my hierarchy, so I can see all the time. And we're gonna add some components to this bullet. Firstly, let's rename this to bullet. Let's call this bullet. And first thing, I'm gonna add a rigid body 2D. So let's click on this click on this add component, and let's add a rigid body 2D. And I will set the gravity body type to kinematic. It's not gonna fall down due to gravity. And collision detection to continuous, and it's done. And let's add one more one more component, which will be a box collider 2D for collision detection. So let's click on this add component, and we will add a box collider 2D, and let's attach that. And we can just edit the collider as the size of our bullet sprite, and you can just play around this. And make sure you just go to is trigger and then check this one. So it's just gonna trigger, and it's not gonna work like as a collision. Basically it's work like just gonna collision at it will not gonna restrict our anything. So that's why we just check this is trigger. And if you just want to learn more about triggers, I will have a video in the description. You can go and check that out. And now let's turn this bullet into a prefab. So we're gonna have the copy, and we can spawn wherever we want. So I'm gonna select my bullet game object in the hierarchy, and let's drag it over to this prefabs folder or inside assets folder. So I'm gonna drag it inside my prefabs folder. So we have the bullet by now. So I'm gonna select my bullet game object in the hierarchy, and let's delete that one. Instead, we just want to spawn once we click the left mouse button. So let's open up our player skip. So player shoot skip by double clicking on it, and just wait a little moment. So for shooting out, what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove this. Instead of printing out message, we're gonna use this instantiate function. And instantiate function, as a first argument, it's gonna take the game object that you want to spawn. So in our case, we're gonna spawn our bullet prefab, or that bullet. And the second thing, it's gonna take the position, and third thing, it's gonna take the rotation. So let's make this one comment by double forward slash, and we do know that it's not gonna interrupt our code. And let's go to top of our class, and let's gather those information. So the first thing, we need a that bullet game object reference. So let's make a public that bullet game object is a whole game object. So we're gonna type this game object, and we can call simply this one bullet prefab. So let's call this one bullet prefab, or bullet simply. And the second thing, we need position. So let's make also a public transform, which is responsible for position, and we can call this one shoot point. So let's call this one shoot point, and let's close that up with semicolon. And let's press down Ctrl S to save our skip, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our player shoot script, those field will appear. So the first thing will appear our bullet prefab, and by default that will be empty. So what we need to do there, we basically need to drag the bullet prefab. As we drag it inside this prefab folder, we need to drag it into that slot. So we're gonna have the bullet prefab or that bullet game object, and then we can just spawn that. So just wait a little moment in order to compile our script, and once it's done we need to assign those variable one by one. So now it's done, and so just wait a little moment. Now we can see underneath our player shoot script bullet prefab appears. So let's move over to project tab, then prefab. Basically move over to that folder in which folder you just turned it into a prefab, that bullet. So in my case I have inside my prefab folder, so I'm going to select that, drag it over to this bullet prefab slot, and now we can see we have the bullet prefab and we are ready to spawn. And second thing, we need our point from where we want to spawn. So let's create a point, fire point or shoot point. So I'm gonna delete this one, and let's create a shoot point. So let's right click on this player game object in hierarchy, and let's create an empty child game object, and we can name this game object to something like shoot point. So let's call this one shoot point, and let's select the move tool in the scene view, and let's move it top of this gun somewhere over here, I guess, and this should be fine. And if you want to choose an gizmos or icon, then go over to inspector, click over here, and you can choose. So I'm going to choose this one, and now we're going to select our player shoot script, and let's select the shoot point, drag it over to this shoot point field. Now we have our bullet prefab as well as the shoot point, and we are ready to spawn that. So let's open up our player script by double clicking on it, and let's remove these two forward slashes in order to, so make sure you use this instantiate function in order to spawn the bullet. So the first thing, it's gonna take the our game object that we want to spawn. So we're gonna pass our bullet prefab, comma, second thing, it's gonna take the position. So we will pass our shoot point, sorry, we will pass our shoot point, and that is a transform. So we're gonna access the position. So let's type this dot position because we need the position. And the third thing, it's gonna take the rotation. So we don't want any rotation like that, so we're gonna pass quaternion dot identity. It's basically means no rotation, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity. So whenever we're gonna click left mouse button, you will see that bullet prefab or that bullet game object will be spawned from this shoot point, because that instantiate function is spawned that we want to spawn as a first argument it's gonna take, and the second thing, it's gonna take the position from where you want to spawn. So it's gonna spawn from this shoot point because we pass shoot point as a second parameter. So now let's have a look. So let's give it a moment to compile our script, and if we click on this play button by now and try to click left mouse button, you will see those bullets will be spawned from our shoot point. So just wait a little moment and you will see that. So now if I click left mouse button, so just wait. So if I click left mouse button, as you can see, indeed those bullets are spawning, but the problem is that those bullets, it's not moving at all in the right direction. So let's get out of play mode. So we need to move those bullets after spawning that. To do so, let's open up our player shoot escape one more time. So let's open that up quickly. So as you can see, we're spawning this bullet prefab at this position with no rotation. After spawning it, what we're gonna do, we're gonna store it into another container, that bullet which we spawned it. So that will be a game object type. Why? Because this bullet prefab itself a whole game object, and we can call this one simply something like temp bullet or for temporary bullet, and let's set equal to this. So what we simply doing, whatever we spawning this bullet at this position with no rotation, and after that we just taking this bullet what we spawn it and storing into this temp bullet container, or this game object temp bullet variable, or you can simply say game object container, which is storing that. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna access the rigid body of that bullet. If we move to Unity, then move over to this prefab folder and select this bullet prefab, we can see we added a rigid body 2D component to this bullet game object. So we're going to access this rigid body 2D component of this bullet, because this rigid body 2D component is responsible for velocity, adding force, and all of those things. So that's why we're going to access the velocity, and we're going to set the velocity equal to some unit. So let's move over to our script. So now we're gonna access, so we will use this stem bullet, and then we're gonna use this dot get component and then make these arrows, and the component we're looking for is a rigid body 2D, and let's make first bracket. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna access the velocity. So we're gonna access the velocity, but we don't get it. Instead we need to use this linear velocity in newer Unity version or in Unity 6. So what we simply doing, we just going to temp bullet where we store it, getting the rigid body 2D component and accessing the linear velocity. And now we're gonna set the velocity equal to, firstly we're gonna take our direction, in which direction we shooting. Sorry, we can set the velocity with some number. Let's make a variable for that, so we can just adjust underneath our inspector tab. So let's make a public float, and we can call this one velocity. So let's call this one instead bullet velocity. So we're gonna call it bullet velocity, velocity equal to some unit, something. By default I'm gonna set 7f or 7 unit, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now I'm gonna set the linear velocity equal to my bullet velocity. And what we have to do now, we also need to multiply these things in the direction that we want to shoot out our bullet. So we want to shoot out the bullet in the right direction, so we can simply use this new vector 2, and we don't want to move our bullet in the y-axis at all, something like this vertically. We only want to do in horizontally. So that's why in the x we're gonna put plus 1f or 1, simply comma, second thing it's gonna take the y. So we're gonna put 0f. We don't want to move our velocity in the y-axis, so that's why we just put 0f in the y. And now we're gonna close that up with semicolon. So bullet velocity is by default we set 7. So 7 into 1 just gonna be 7, means our bullet will move to the right direction with 7 unit. And what we can simply do now, we can simply press down Ctrl S to save our code. But before it, let me explain what we're doing. Firstly, we're spawning the bullet and storing that bullet into this temp bullet, and then we're just going over to that bullet what we spawned and accessing the rigid body 2D. Basically we're just going over to this bullet game object and accessing this rigid body 2D component, and we're setting the linear velocity equal to our this, which is bullet velocity which is 7. So 7 into this, so the bullet will move towards to the right direction with 7 unit of speed. And now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity. And we can adjust the speed underneath our player shoot script. So that's why we just made that public float bullet velocity. So that's why we just made bullet velocity parameter public, so we can adjust underneath our player shoot script. So just wait a little moment and you will get that. So just wait a little moment, and if I select my player game object in the hierarchy, and underneath my player script, underneath my player shoot script, we can see we have the bullet velocity. By default we set 7 unit. So if I just click on this play button in the top, instead of using new vector and then putting the value, instead you can use the vector to dot right. It's basically means the same thing, 1 in the x and 0 in the y. So let's have a look. So if I now click left mouse button on left mouse button basically, so if I click left mouse button, just wait, as you can see bullet indeed it's going to the right direction with 7 unit, but the problem is that bullet is just going and going. So we also need to destroy this bullet after some period amount of time. So let's get out of play mode. To do so, let's move over to our player shoot script. So we storing that bullet into this temp bullet. So basically we also need to destroy the container or where we stored our bullet. So in order to destroy that, we can use this destroy function, and this function as a first argument it's going to take the game object we want to destroy. So in our case temp bullet or where we store it. Second thing, it's going to take the time. So we're going to put something like 5f, basically means after 5 seconds that temp bullet will be also be destroyed, basically where we stored that bullet game object. that will also be destroyed. And now we're going to close that up with semicolon. And instead of using this new vector2 like this, we can simply use this vector2 dot right. It's basically means one in the x, so the bullet will move to the right direction, y in the 0, so the bullet will not move in the y axis. Or we can simply use this one as well, which is shoot point dot sorry, we can use this shoot point dot right. Shoot point dot right basically means which direction shoot point is facing. So if we select our player and press down F in order to focus on it and select this shoot point, we can see shoot point is facing to the right direction. So shoot point dot right basically means that direction, and we multiplying that direction with our velocity of the we just multiplying with bullet velocity. So the bullet will move to the right direction with 7 unit, or the with bullet velocity that we set the value. But instead of doing this, I'm going to use this vector2 dot right. It's basically means the same thing, 1 in the x, y in the 0. And now I'm going to press down Ctrl S in order to set my script. So whenever we clicking the left mouse button, then we calling the shoot function, and shoot function doing these things as you can see. And let's move to Unity now. So when after 5 seconds, you will see those bullets will be destroyed. So let's have a look on it. So let's wait a little moment, and you will see that. So just wait a little moment, and now if we click on this play button in the top, you will see as soon as we're gonna click left mouse button, that bullet will be spawned from our shoot point, and that bullet will go to the right direction. We pass vector2 dot right. It's basically means 1 in the x, y in the 0. So if I now click left mouse button, as you can see bullet is spawning, and you will see this bullet will destroy after 5 seconds. As you can see, indeed those bullet just getting destroyed after 5 seconds, and we can take a look over here. So I hope you get the idea. So I'm gonna get out of play mode.